ਗੁਰ ਚਰਨ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਬਸ ਰਹੇ ਹਿਰਦੈ ਗੁਰ ਚਰਨ ਪਿਆਰੇ.
Hello, welcome to Lecture 9, Introduction to the Sikhs. And this lecture concludes our historical excursion. I'm going to talk about the community from partition to the present. Perhaps not all aspects of the community. I'll separately talk about Sikh migration to other countries and the results of that diaspora in a subsequent lecture. But within the context of India, after independence, I'll describe what happened to the community. So again, the impacts of partition were a mass migration. It also, for the Sikhs, led to a loss of prime agricultural land. So Sikhs had been successful farmers in Punjab. A lot of this land was now in Pakistan, and Sikhs had to give up very large swaths of land. They were compensated, but with much smaller plots of land in what was now Indian Punjab. Sikhs were also separated from Lahore, which had been Punjab's cultural and political capital. Lahore was the capital of Punjab in the provincial capital of Punjab in the Mughal Empire, and it had also been the capital of Ranjit Singh's Sikh kingdom. On the religious front, there was the loss of significant historic shrines. For example, Nankana Sahib, Guru Nanak's birthplace, and many other sites which marked important aspects of Sikh history. And in addition to the disruption of Sikhs in terms of loss of agricultural lands, there was a general and disproportionate economic disruption for the Sikh community, because they, as a proportion of the migration, they were relatively significant. I think there was also some suspicion of Sikhs in independent India, because some of them had tried to get an independent third country, third nation, and this was somewhat subdued, but certainly seemed to become an issue in certain political decision making. Now, so as I've said, the seeds of this suspicion were the pre-independence attempt by some Sikhs for an independent state, not part of India or Pakistan. But there was also a continued desire on the part of Sikhs to protect their distinct cultural and religious identity. And this was combined with the fact that Punjab, what was left of Punjab the state of Punjab in India, continued to border Pakistan, and so this was strategically very important region for the Indian government, and therefore Sikhs were viewed as potential fifth columnists sometimes by the Indian government. Punjab also borders Jammu and Kashmir, which was a Muslim majority state, claimed by both India and Pakistan. And here there's an interesting connection to Ranjit Singh's kingdom. Ranjit Singh conquered Kashmir, and one of his generals was actually from the Hindu Dogra community, and that general betrayed the Sikhs in the Anglo-Sikh Wars, and as a reward he was made Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir by the British. And it was his descendant who chose to side with India at the time of partition. Kashmir was quite exceptional because other Muslim majority regions or states within India were completely surrounded by Hindu majority or British parts of India, so they had no choice. In Kashmir's case, Pakistan disputed this accession of Kashmir to India and sent invaders and led to the first of several battles between India and Pakistan and to what is now the line of control. So this is an unsettled issue many decades later. But in any case, because of the strategic sensitivity and the problem of conflict between India and Pakistan, Punjab has been, and the Sikhs have been somewhat caught in the middle of that as well. Now, what the minority status of the Sikhs and their position in a strategically sensitive region of India led to was an ongoing low-level political conflict. And the Sikhs were not unique in this context. One of the most significant other examples within India after independence has been the northeastern region, which is ethnically very heterogeneous and where many of the indigenous populations are not part of mainstream Hinduism, and they have different languages, cultures, and so on. So the Indian national government has often had to deal with conflicts there and suppressed minorities there as well. In Punjab and for the Sikhs, there were broader issues of culture, but the specific issues that arose for the Sikhs were protecting the Punjabi language, which is very important to Sikhs because it is the language of the sacred text, and the script Gurmukhi is used for that. And then protecting the character of the Sikh religion against encroachment or erosion from the Hindu majority. So these are issues which actually persist to the present day in various forms. The period I'm describing is after independence from, say, the 1940s to the 1960s. One positive action that the Indian national government did take was in 1966, where what had been demarcated as the state of Punjab in independent India was further divided into two new states, Punjab and Haryana. And Punjab then became a Sikh majority state, which allowed the Punjab government to promote, for example, language and to some extent the Sikh religion, though avowedly not as a religious state. This period was also a time of prosperity in Punjab, because Punjab and Haryana next to it became the cradle of the Green Revolution in India. The term Green Revolution refers to the introduction of high-yielding varieties of wheat and later rice. And this was a time where, before the Green Revolution, India was struggling with self-sufficiency in food. There were food shortages and sometimes the need to have emergency imports of food. So this was a major national priority. And the development of high-yielding varieties of wheat in particular became extremely important. This increased agricultural productivity in Punjab because the national government became a guaranteed buyer of wheat and later rice. It provided a lot of security and insulation against risk for Punjabi farmers. So this was a period where there was not only material prosperity, but also some flourishing of Sikhs as a minority community within larger independent India, where they were able to articulate and develop their distinctive language, religion, and culture. Unfortunately, this period did not last too long. Already by the early 1970s, there were issues arising, some of them due to the water needs of the Green Revolution, and some connected to larger political and ideological concerns of the national government. So the dispute over water was actually a dispute over the sharing of river waters in Punjab. Now, in 1960, a treaty had been signed between India and Pakistan where several of the waters of the tributaries of the Indus, which constituted the 5 rivers of Punjab. Those waters, even though the rivers arose in Indian-controlled Kashmir, flowed into Pakistan, and all that water was allotted to Pakistan. So there was a limited amount of water that was going to Punjab, and this was split between Punjab, Haryana, and also the state of Rajasthan, which was to the southwest of Punjab and Haryana. So the water needs of Green Revolution technologies began to create pressures and then political conflicts over the sharing of river waters. Other issues arose because the national government failed to make any hard decision with respect to the city of Chandigarh, which had been built as after independence as the capital of Punjab. And when Punjab was partitioned into Punjab and Haryana, the national government decided not to make a call of giving it to Punjab, and instead treated it as what is known in India as a union territory, centrally administered by the national government, and a shared capital of Punjab and Haryana. And this was driven by political considerations to appeal to the state government of Haryana, which was important for the ruling party in New Delhi, the capital. In the 70s, there were also emerging concerns about the preservation of Sikh religious traditions, and some of this, of course, was the result of the impact of modernity and globalization, where you had the encroachment of other cultural traditions with, for example, the expansion of television and Bollywood movies and other kinds of media, which, of course, has expanded even more after in the internet age. But sticking with the 1970s, the conflict began to escalate between the Sikh community and the national government. In this case, geopolitics had a major impact. The India-Pakistan War of 1971 led to the creation of Bangladesh. This was driven by a revolt in East Pakistan against what Bengalis in East Pakistan felt was oppression by the majority in West Pakistan. Actually, they were actually a minority at that stage in the West, but they dominated the politics of the joint nation. In any case, there was a crackdown in East Pakistan, which led to millions of refugees fleeing from East Pakistan to India. That led to a war between India and Pakistan. And India defeated Pakistan very quickly, and Bangladesh became an independent nation. This subsequently led to attempts by Pakistan then to engage in tit-for-tat efforts to destabilize parts of India, such as Punjab, and also, of course, there was this ongoing conflict over Kashmir. Perhaps an even more significant geopolitical event was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. And of course, we've seen the impacts of that globally for decades after that. What we're seeing in Afghanistan now is very much a legacy of the Soviet invasion of 1979. But what it led to immediately was an influx of guns into the region, often funded by U.S. military support of rebels who were fighting the Soviets. And those guns then found their way into Pakistan and then also into Punjab, Indian Punjab. Now, at this time, domestic politics was also becoming very contentious. The national government was feeling insecure. At one stage, Indira Gandhi, the prime minister, even declared an emergency and suspended democracy in India. And one of the outcomes of that was more contentious domestic politics at the state level. In Punjab, competition for control of or political influence with various aspects of the Sikh community, various groups in the Sikh community, led to the emergence of someone known as Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. His birth name was different, but he took the name Bhindranwale from the place where he was educated as a religious leader. It's basically what one might call a Sikh ceremony, Sikh seminary, excuse me. And Bhindranwale became then very much a problem for the state and national governments. They dealt with him very ineffectively because they were trying to manipulate him for their own ends, but this led to a major tragedy. So what happened is that in the early 1980s, the national government, and then to the extent that the state government was allied with it, was trying to deal with Sikh unrest as epitomized by Bhindranwale. And Bhindranwale was very upset with the erosion of what he saw as traditional Sikh values and the lack of morality in modern life. And he also felt that Sikh identity was being eroded by the Hindu majority. Bhindranwale, because he felt threatened by the state apparatus, state and national governments, ended up being taking refuge in the Darbar Sahib complex, not in the Darbar Sahib itself, but in the surrounding buildings. And he was accompanied by armed supporters. Now, it's interesting that before this, Bhindranwale had been arrested for potential acts of violence or acts of violence that he was accused of. But the government had actually released him again, not really taking decisive action. But when they did take action, it was done in absolutely the worst way possible. In June 1984, the Indian government used the army rather than the police force, local police forces, and they used tanks and missiles to attack the Darbar Sahib to dislodge the militants. This was innocuously called Operation Blue Star, but it has become one of the most significant events in Sikh history. So I've talked about Sikh history in terms of, especially after 1606 and the martyrdom of Guru Arjan, as a struggle against oppression and struggle against even genocide. And the British period also was marked by examples such as the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and the killings and arrest of Sikhs who were protesting over the control of Sikh gurdwaras by these non-Sikh functionaries. So this was Sikh history, and this really was something that perhaps should have been in the past in a modern democratic country, but what we saw was actually then a much more modern example of violence and state oppression. The Indian government chose to attack the Darbar Sahib on probably the worst day possible, both symbolically and in terms of loss of human life. They did so on the anniversary of Guru Arjan's martyrdom, and there were thousands of pilgrims staying in the complex, and thousands of them were killed along with the militants. There was also very heavy damage to the complex. One of the most important historical buildings in the complex, the Akal Takht, which had been erected by Guru Hargobind to mark the duality of temporal and spiritual leadership, was badly damaged. The Sikh historical library was burned with many irreplaceable manuscripts lost. So this was probably one of the worst tragedies that could have happened to the community. And again, it was something that for many Sikhs resonated with their memories of, or memories handed down through generations of oppression and sacrifice. What happened after Operation Blue Star in June was then just a downward spiral. In October of that year, the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who had ordered the attack, was assassinated by two of her bodyguards who were Sikhs, and they had taken an oath to exact revenge for the attack on Darbar Sahib. The next day then saw government-sponsored massacres of Sikhs in the capital city of Delhi, where Indira Gandhi was assassinated, but also in many other urban centers of India. And the Indian government told the police and army not to intervene while organized mobs went around massacring Sikhs. So this was just yet another example for Sikhs of unjust oppression. And what resulted was that the conflict in Punjab just became worse. From 1984 to roughly 1992, the Sikh militancy continued, but it was slowly crushed by the army and by the local police working in concert with the army. There were a lot of extrajudicial killings by the police, and there were also atrocities committed by supposed Sikh militants. In this case, sometimes they were actually agents of the government who had infiltrated the militant groups. But this is, again, a very dark period in the history of the community. Eventually, the militancy was crushed, but its legacy continues to this day because there was a complete suspension of normal politics. There was basically military rule in Punjab. And what we've seen then is a considerable social and economic deterioration in Punjab. Again, some of this reflects broader trends, but a lot of it, I think, is the result of the scars left by this period. The Green Revolution, meanwhile, has left another harmful legacy, that of environmental problems. Because of the lack of adequate river water, after it was shared with Haryana and Rajasthan, Punjabi farmers started to drill tube wells and extract groundwater. The government, trying to support farmers, provided them with subsidized fuel to work the pumps, and also, in some cases, free electricity if the pumps were electric. So what one got was basically a very rapid and unsustainable depletion of groundwater resources in Punjab. The increased growth of rice, which was a relatively late comer in the Green Revolution, also increased the water usage because it's much more water intensive. And in other parts of Punjab, you actually got, because of the cultivation patterns, you got water logging. There was also examples. There have also been examples of pollution of water through chemical fertilizers being used inappropriately. So Punjab is actually on the brink of a major environmental crisis right now. So the after effects of this of the last decades have been really quite major. There are still strong memories of the recent troubles because. For example, even among the Sikh population in North America, many people can tell stories of relatives who disappeared during that period. Basically, the police picked them up and they were never heard from again. There were mass graves discovered and so on. And as I've said, this was linked in Sikh memories to the history of struggle from 1606 onward. Adding salt to these wounds was that the culprits for the government-sponsored killings after the assassination of Indira Gandhi were never really brought to account. There were eyewitness reports which identified that certain politicians were actually actively directing the mobs, but there was really no action taken. Recently, there has been some movement, but perhaps it's too little, too late. Interestingly, Sikhs have still had to navigate this minority position, and many of them have served with distinction in the Sikh national government and administrative structures and so on. For example, there was a Sikh Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh, from 2004 to 2014, but he was really a professional economist who was brought in as a frontman because the Congress party at that time did not want to be led by somebody who was of foreign descent, Sonia Gandhi. In any case, Manmohan Singh did make an apology in the Indian Parliament for what had happened in 1984, but again, this was not quite the closure that Sikhs were looking for. Now, I want to foreshadow a little bit what we'll be talking about in future lectures, but not immediately, so we'll come back to it after discussing some more aspects of Sikh society and culture. But I'd mentioned that Sikh soldiers had begun to see the world in 1897 as part of Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee celebrations. They also fought in World War I in Europe. In any case, Sikh emigration began around the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, around 1900, and there were various waves thereafter. The connection I want to make to the events I've been discussing is that 1984 and the aftermath of 1984, which was marked by political repression and economic deterioration, led to a large increase in Sikh emigration. And that's something that we'll touch on when we talk about the Sikh community in North America and the United States in particular.